Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today, for investing your time and coming to this event, as Swami Padmanabha will be speaking today about Krishna's unconditional love as a pathway to self-care. So before we begin, we'll start with a short bio of Swami Padmanabha. He is a monk, a theologian, a scholar within the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition of Hinduism. For over 25 years, he has traveled extensively, delivering lectures in universities, conferences, ashrams, churches, and institutions worldwide. Fluent in English and Spanish, Swami is the author of 2 books published in multiple languages and praised by both academics and practitioners. Additionally, Swami hosts the Free Radical podcast, where he engages in conversations with guests from diverse disciplines. Swami Padmanabha is the founder of Tadatmya Devotional Alliance, where he serves as spiritual mentor, drawing inspiration from his various guides. So thank you very much for joining us today, Maharaj, for your presence and your willingness to bring this important topic to the table. So you're welcome to begin when you are ready.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rasa, for the introduction, and thank you all for the invitation, for the organization of this annual conference on progressive Vaishnavism. I'm very happy to have the chance to share a few words on this important topic for me, and which is very tied to the notion, this topic to the notion of remaining progressive, understanding our relationship with Krishna, with the divine, as ongoing, as ever-evolving, and as healthy, as something worthy of pursuing in eternity. For that, it has to be a relationship that we look up for, that we are really passionate about, and for that, we need to have a healthy perspective of who God is and who we are in connection to Him, to her, to them. So today's topic is Krishna's unconditional love as a pathway to self-care. Somehow the topic is also really relevant for me in the sense that I'm writing a 4th book, though my 3rd one has not been published yet, but I'm writing a 4th book on this topic of Krishna's unconditional love and how that impacts in the notion of self-love, self-care, self-worth. Recently also we did a very nice podcast with Sri Mahatma Prabhu on this topic, also self-love in bhakti. I have been given some presentations on that recently as well. So it's a topic that I found very important, and in my personal experience while sharing this theme, this is probably arguably maybe the main theme that the devotees have thanked me for speaking about. For some reason, it's relevant. For some reason, most of us need to not only to hear, but to understand that that's actually a fact, that Krishna loves you, loves us, loves everyone. And therefore, on that foundation, I can learn to love myself and to love others in that context. So I cannot tell you how many times different devotees, different people approach me and express their gratitude for just being reminded of they are loved. You are loved, you are lovable, you are loving. So that invites us to love as well, right? So for me, this is a very crucial topic. It's a topic that if we don't get it right, probably we will get many other things wrong, because this is a foundational topic. So if the foundation is not in place, like when you are building a house, if the foundation is weak, is distorted, is made of something it shouldn't be made, no matter how nice the house, it will crumble in time. So in the same way, if our bhakti house, our bhakti temple, the project that we are trying to build in our heart, our bhakti project, is not constructed on firm foundations, probably it will never grow. If it grows, it may crumble in time. So the firm foundation, one of them for me, one of these pillars is this idea of Krishna's unconditional love for everyone is a given. If we don't emphasize that enough, we will get a distorted idea of who Krishna is. And again, this needs to be emphasized enough, which means it's not enough to just mention that once, because probably we have heard the opposite sometimes. So we have thought the opposite. We have concluded the opposite for a long time. So we may need now to counteract that with a similar level of emphasis. And of course, with proper reference to the scriptures and our tradition to show that this is not a new fancy idea, but it's deeply rooted in Shastra and in scripture. So again, if we don't emphasize that Krishna is made of unconditional love, not only he has it, if we don't emphasize that enough, we will get a distorted idea of who he is. God as unloving, God as indifferent, God as irrelevant, basically. We are irrelevant to him, and suddenly he becomes irrelevant for us. So from which place we will end up practicing our bhakti. Because if we get a wrong idea about God, by extension, we may get a wrong idea about ourselves. That's another way, because if God is unloving, then I become unlovable and unloved. You follow my point? If we get a wrong idea about the very root of reality, Krishna, we may get a wrong idea about everything else that is rooted in that reality. We may get a wrong idea about how everything else relates to the root. Because if the root is unloving, then everything that is connected to the root is unloved by that unloving root. You follow my point? So if Krishna is unloving and he's the root and I'm connected with that root, then my identity, his identity is unloving, my identity is unlovable and unloved by the unloving root. And that's not true. But if we don't get that right, we get a wrong idea on Krishna. We get a wrong idea on ourselves. And if we try to practice bhakti on that foundation of wrong ideas, you can imagine if the sambandha or the original orientation, the foundational knowledge is wrong, the abhideya or the practice will be guided by the wrong knowledge. And you can imagine how the experience of the practice will be, and which will be the prayojan or the fruit of that practice, not precisely a sweet one. So if we have a distorted foundation, if we are somehow convinced Krishna is indifferent, Krishna doesn't love me, I first have to love him in order for him to love me, and all the type of things. If we have that idea, no wonder that many times, even in the name of Krishna consciousness, not only we won't make progress, not only we will feel stagnant, not only we will feel mechanical and just doing things out of ritual, out of social pressure, social dynamics, or just to fit in the group. Not only all those things will happen with such a distorted idea, but probably we may be even increasing our problems, increasing our trauma, increasing neurosis, increases fear, increasing intimidation. If there's a wrong foundation and you put God in the picture of that wrong foundation, that can create such dysfunctional dynamics, all in the name of spiritual practice. It's possible. It's not the idea, of course. We are not promoting that, but it's possible. Srila Prabhupada will say that Krishna consciousness isn't like a razor's edge, right? So you can make a very nice shaving, like the one I need in a few days when Kartik is over, or you can, if you don't know how to deal with it, if you use it in a wrong way, if you misunderstand the actual purpose and how to use it, you can just cut all your face. So we can take Krishna consciousness from a distorted place, and that can be so harmful. Because again, if I enter into if I start practicing with this idea, Krishna doesn't love me, Krishna is maybe even angry at me, so I am unworthy, I am despicable, I am unlovable, and that makes me, I'm afraid of God. I start to practice spirituality from a place of unworthiness, a place of fear, intimidation, again, fitting in instead of belonging, not trying to please God lovingly, not trying to celebrate existence through the path of bhakti, but just struggling to deserve something that seems that I will never deserve because I'm so undeserving. At least we have heard that. So again, you get my point. How the same thing that has the potential to take us to the heights of healing and well-being and wholeness, by being wrongly understood, wrongly approached, wrongly pursued, can create trauma. We can create so much trauma, neurosis, suffering, unnecessary pain, avoidable anxiety. We can create all that in the name of God. And that, again, is not limited to the Gaudiya Vaishnava community. That can happen anywhere and everywhere. We humans are very expert on that. So recently, I'm here in Mayapur, my last day tomorrow traveling to Jagannath Puri. So these days we have been having a series of lectures here, 6-part series. The title was How to Rediscover Krishna in Our Life. Somehow it's connected to today's topic. How to rediscover Krishna in our life, how to allow Krishna to be who he actually is, how not to project our ideas about Krishna. Our ideas about Krishna are not the same as Krishna. The concept Krishna is not the same as the person Krishna necessarily. So I can have a wrong idea about Krishna and project that and make Krishna that in my life. And Krishna ends up being a wrong concept instead of a real person. So in this series of lectures, we talk about the importance of many times unlearning distorted ideas we have about God, about ourselves, and about everything by extension. And we quoted Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur in one part of one of his works, he's quoting different anarthas. And many times we think of anarthas as just lust, greed, envy, and all that stuff. But interestingly, Bhaktivinoda Thakur begins speaking about tattva vibhrama, which means basically to be bewildered about tattva, about reality, about what is what. To be bewildered, to be confused, to have wrong ideas about who Krishna is. That's an anartha. To be a wrong idea about who am I, that's an anartha. To think that Krishna is unloving, that's an anartha. To think that I'm unlovable, that's an anartha. So anartha nibriti means to counteract those anarthas, means to solve, to heal and those sections, and to understand how Krishna is loving and made of love, and we are therefore loved unconditionally by him. So it's an important point, because if we have the wrong conception, again, sorry if I'm repeating this too much, but sometimes we need to pound the post. If we have the wrong conception about anything, in this case about the most important person, that will lead us to a wrong relationship. If I have a wrong idea about who you are, I will try to relate from that wrong idea, and I won't experience the relationship I could experience with the wrong idea about you. You follow? Let's speak about us humans. If I'm relating to you, and somehow I concluded that you're a serial killer when you are not. I conclude that you're an indifferent, unloving, cruel person when you are not. I will approach you with that consideration in mind, and that surely will affect my experience of the relationship. If I will have the proper idea that you are actually the most loving, merciful, and compassionate person, that will be an entirely different experience of the relationship. So again, wrong conception, wrong idea about Krishna takes us to a wrong sense of relationship, and a wrong experience of that relationship. You can imagine what was the result of that, no? Wrong experience of the relationship with Krishna, with us, with everyone else, thinking that we are something we are not, and so on and so forth. So I hope you get a glimpse. This is an introduction, but I hope you get a glimpse of how foundational is to get this right, especially because everything is interrelated, right? Sambandha. We have this expression in Sanskrit, sambandha means everything. Sambandha is bonded, is tied together. There is an interconnectedness. Reality is about relationality. So everything is interrelated with Krishna in the center. And we all share this commonality of sharing this common center. So if everything is interrelated, that means that a wrong idea about myself will result in a wrong idea about God. Because everything is interrelated. A wrong idea about something will result in a wrong idea about anything else or everything else. You follow my point? How or a wrong idea about myself results in a wrong idea about God, because I project my own distorted self-image into everything else, including Krishna. And a wrong idea about Krishna similarly results in a wrong idea about who am I and who everyone else is. So how we view anyone affects how we view everyone else, everything else, because everything is interconnected. So that's beautiful, everything is interconnected, but that's potentially dangerous and tricky, because you get something wrong in that equation. Like Srila Prabhupada will say, right? If you're adding numbers and the first addition is 2 plus 6, and you say 8, 9, you made it wrong. No matter how correctly are the further additions, the end result won't be correct, because you started with the wrong foundation, with the wrong first step. So I will argue that this is a very foundational first step that we need to get in place. Krishna is loving us unconditionally. We are being loved by him. get a coherent, healthy idea about who God is, who we are in connection to Him. That's Krishna consciousness. No, this expression, Krishna consciousness, what? To be conscious of Krishna, but to be conscious of Krishna for who Krishna is, not to be conscious of my idea about Krishna who has nothing to do with who Krishna is. So Krishna consciousness, get an accurate picture of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you had a wrong picture, you cannot be conscious of Krishna. It's like consciousness of your ideas about Krishna, which is not the same. So to know Krishna properly also implies to know everything else for what it is, including ourselves, since nothing exists independent of Him. So, since our ideas about Krishna are not the same as Krishna, we can have so many ideas about anything, but we get the proper picture. Let's begin with some reflection. And of course, I do it myself. Generally, when I talk about this, I invite the public to share their own, to do some brainstorming together. But let's begin with the idea, the opposite idea. Sometimes it helps to start with a negative conception. Let's start with who Krishna is not, and by extension, who we are not, before we go to who Krishna is and who we actually are in connection to Him. So who Krishna is not, of course, in the thread you can share your ideas. No, but who Krishna is not, in truth, actually, not according to our ideas, because for some of us, Krishna is not loving, but that's not who Krishna is not. That's who Krishna is. So who Krishna is not, truly, according to what He Himself say, according to what is revealed in the scriptures. So Krishna is not, let's say, I don't know, He's not a faraway person, indifferent entity whom I will meet in a far distant future. No, Krishna is not a future person. He's in the here and now, in the present, in the immediacy. He's not a faraway person. He's in the present moment and as close, as intimate as we can imagine. He's so close that we don't see Him. He's so intimate that we lost sight of Him many times. And He's not indifferent. He's in everyone's heart, absolutely aware of what's going on in our heart, in His omniscience. And it's a loving omniscience, as we will see. So Krishna is not someone unaware of my existence. Krishna is not someone, of course, we hear Krishna is absorbed in Leela with his devotees, and he's captured by the prem of the Brajavasis, and so many beautiful statements, but he retains his omniscience. And he reciprocates accordingly with each person in different forms, whether it's Krishna, Paramatma. But when we say those things, okay, Krishna interacts with his devotees and Paramatma interacts with those who are not interested in bhakti. Okay, but still Krishna and Paramatma are the same person, right? Be careful of creating a dualistic separation there. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are the same tattva, one non-dual substance. Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaneti, Shabdyate, says the Bhagavatam. So he is not unaware of our existence. He's aware of what's going on, and he's accompanying us, extending his presence as much as he can to create the most favorable influence in each chapter of our lives. He's not an angry person. He's not angry at us. He's not disliking us. He's not disgusted as who we are, as an Atma. No? Or he's not someone who is playing it difficult when it comes to us loving him. No, he's not that bad of a person, to put it simply. No? Or he's not someone who demands being worshipped, being loved, and only then reciprocates, this is a common idea. I have to struggle and to make all this effort and become a pure devotee and become perfect, whatever that means, and deserve love, and only then Krishna loves me back, which doesn't sound at all like unconditional love. Sounds pretty conditional, right? The condition being, become perfect, love me, this, and then I love you. So that's not Krishna. Again, we have to unlearn and discard all the false versions of Krishna that we may even have entertained for some time, and they may have been even useful in some way, but actually at one point they become obsolete. And we need to rediscover Krishna for who he actually is. So in conclusion, who Krishna is not, he's not unloving. He's not that. As we will see, he's exactly the opposite. And in connection to us, who we are, of course, we are Atma. Don't forget this when we say we are not who we think we are. because most part of the day, maybe we are identified with who we are not. But who we are not as an Atma, we are not insignificant. We are connected with Bhagavan. The Atma is Ascharyavat, as we will see. So amazing. Sometimes we hear, no, but Maharaj in the scriptures say the Atma is 1,000 of the tip of a hair. So that seems pretty insignificant. No, actually, that means you cannot measure the Atma. That's the point of it. It's not like you are so miserable and despicable and less than 1,000 of the tip of a hair. No, that means how much you can measure 1,000 of the tip of a hair. In the same way, the Atma is not measurable. Don't try to measure it. Try to approach it from another place by proper sadhana and revelation. So the Atma is not unworthy. You are not unworthy. You are not despicable. You are not unlovable. You can repeat that to yourself all the times you need it, from a healthy place, not from any egotistic, narcissistic place. But the Atma, who you are not unlovable. You are not inadequate. You are not deficient. You are not unlikable. You are not deplorable. And you know that list of our adjectives. So you are not any of that. Of course, at the present moment, we find ourselves in the conditioned situation, unaware of who we actually are. But we should be very careful not to over-identify with that dust, because ultimately that dust, that conditioning, however you may like to call it, that doesn't belong to the Atma. The conditioning is not inherent in the soul, because if we will be inherently conditioned, then there will be no chance to transcend the conditioning, because it's inherent. It's part of your constitution. So by constitution, we are not all the things we think we are. Let's put it that way. So anyhow, a few thoughts in connection to who Krishna is not and who we are not. So of course the question then is, so who is Krishna then and who we are? Let's go to more of the positive side. Of course, we have shared some glimpses already. Let's begin with us, since we ended up with us. Who is the Atma, who we are? Well, Krishna has to say something very interesting in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 2nd chapter, after saying who the Atma is not. The Atma cannot be killed, cannot be burned, doesn't die, is not born, all in negative terms, what the Atma is not. Then he says something positive. He has to say something positive, and he uses the word Ascharyavat, which basically means wonderful or amazing. And he uses the word 3 times in that verse. You are basically, he's telling to you, to the Atma, to each one of us, you are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Ascharyavat means that, shockingly wonderful, miraculous. The Sanskrit dictionary translates Ascharya in that word. Krishna is looking at the Atma, looking at the potential of the Atma in divine love, and say, you are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So there is a place for us to say, I am wonderful, in a humbling place, from a humbling place. I'm humbling, I'm wonderful, but I'm not my own creation, right? So I'm not my own product, but I happen to be wonderful. For who am I in my constitution as an Atma? I cannot deny that. I have a duty to become aware of that, because most part of the day I may lose sight of that. But that's Krishna's conclusion. The soul is wonderful. You are wonderful. We cannot argue with that. That's Bhagavan's opinion. So you are wonderful. That's who the Atma is. You are a fully accepted, infinitely loved entity, person. That's who you are. If there is a way, if you would like to ask yourself, who am I? You are someone who is infinitely accepted by the divine. You are the beloved of God. As Henry Nouwen will say. That's a nice way to define who we are. We are the beloved of Krishna. There are different ways, as I quote sometimes by Henry Nouwen as well, like different ways to answer to this question, who am I? The classical perennial question, who am I? Who am I? Many times we think, I am what I do. So whatever I do, that's who am I. I'm a human doing instead of a human being. No, sometimes I am what I have. I over-identify with my possessions. So I'm a human having. Now, from human doing to human having, but still not human being. Or sometimes I am what others think of me. What others think of me, that's what I am. Public opinion, vox populi. I depend on, my sense of identity depends on the comments on social media every single day. That's a very poor, fragile sense of identity. Or sometimes I think who I am what I think of me, not what others think of me, but what I think of me. That may be even worse. because sometimes how I think of me is worse than how I think of anyone else. So don't go in any of those directions to answer to the question, who am I? No, I'm not what I do. I'm not what I have. I'm not what others think of me. I'm not what I think of me. No, so who am I? I'm the beloved of Krishna. That's a very safe place to go. Very safe, profound way of defining myself in connection to the divine, in connection to love. Very hopeful, very empowering. You are the beloved of Krishna. If it helps, you can just repeat that on a daily basis all the times you need. So that's who we are as Atma. And therefore, who is Krishna? And somehow what I just said regarding the Atma will reply this question. No? So we are loved of Krishna, beloved by, we are the beloved of Krishna. So who is Krishna? He's someone who loves us unconditionally. That's a good way to start. I'm not saying that's the only way to reply to this question, but that's a good way to begin. Who is Krishna? He is the person that is loving you infinitely, unconditionally, from time without beginning. Why? Because he's love himself. Rasa Vaisaha, says Taittiriya Upanishad. Him, the absolute, he's rasa. Rasa is a word for the highest form of love. So he is love. Bible says the same thing. God is love. All traditions teach that. So if you are love, you are love. You don't have love. You are love. You cannot refrain from loving because you are made of that. You cannot go against your nature. So that's Krishna's nature. He's made of love. He cannot not love. Therefore, he's loving everything and everyone in different ways. Love takes different shapes, but all that comes from him is affection. And on that foundation, the scripture will describe Bhagavan as our dearest friend, our well-wisher, our maintainer, our beloved. So many descriptions, so many names. So many names. In our tradition, as you know, the name of God is very important. We chant the names of God. Mahaprabhu established very importantly the power of the name of God. And there are unlimited names of God, as Mahaprabhu himself says, Nam Nama Kari Bahuda. There are endless names of God, and many of them. And these names are non-different from Krishna. Abhinatvam Nama Namino, right? Between the name and the named, there's no difference. So there are many names that highlight this compassion and unconditional love from Bhagavan, which basically are non-different from him. So these names indicate how he is, who he is. So I'd like to share a few of those names that there are many, but I'm just going to a few of them that I found some time ago in the famous Vishnu Sahasranam. So Vishnu Sahasranam is the 1,000 names of Vishnu. Don't be scared. I won't go with 1,000. It's just like maybe 10 or something. So 1% of the whole list. No, less, yeah, 1%. So beautiful names that point to this, and you can use these names. You can invoke these names during the day in kirtan, in prayer. You can remind yourself of who you are addressing, what's the nature of that divine personality. So a few of them. First one is Bhuta Bhavana. Bhuta Bhavana can be translated as he who nurtures every being in the universe. The universal nurturer, nourisher. We are being nurtured by his love and affection. Bhuta Bhavana. Anukul is another name coming in this list. Anukul means he who is positively interested in everyone. He who is favorable, Anukul, favorably inclined to every living being without exception. Anukul, positively interested in each one of you, including me. Suhrit, famous name that appears over and over again. He who has a great heart, sometimes translated, and he who is a well-wishing, unconditional friend to everyone. Suhrit, he who has a great heart. Batsi, he who is affectionate. Lokabandhu, he who is the friend of all. He who is the friend of the whole universe. Nibritatma, Nibritatma, he who is always available everywhere. That's a good one. Always available everywhere. It's not that you will call, there will be an answering machine or something like that. He's always available everywhere. It's not that he's always available, but only in this place, only in the temple, only in India, only this. No, everywhere, in any place and at any time. Nibritatma. 3 more names. Sunda. Sunda means he whose heart is always wet. Wet with what? Wet with compassion. So he's dripping unconditional love and acceptance. So he's wet. Sunda. A similar name is Parjanya. As you may know, Parjanya means cloud. So he who is like a cloud, he's just a cloud, who is showering copious grace equally to all. No? Like when there's copious rain, rain is not selective. Oh, I will shower rain on that field of that particular person and not on that guy. I don't like him. Now rain comes and showers upon everyone. But we have to expose ourselves to the rain of grace. So Parjanya. And the last name I want to share from this list, and of course there are many more, I'm just picking a few, is Sarvatamukha. Sarvatamukha means he who can be approached from anywhere, similar to Nibritatma. He who can be approached from any situation, any condition in life, no matter how fallen you are, how embarrassed you are, how much you have failed miserably, how bad you feel about yourself, he can be approached from that moment. He's available. He's extending his presence as much as he can. He's Karuna Sindhu. He's an ocean of mercy. Kripamai. He's made of grace. His nature is that. Because he's love, again, as we say, in essence, Krishna is love. And therefore, he's not able to stop loving. He cannot stop loving. Because of that, Krishna will say things in the Bhagavad Gita at the end of chapter 5, like Suhridam Sarvabhutanam. I'm the well-wisher and I'm the unconditional friend of Sarvabhutanam, of all living beings. Krishna not only loves his devotees, he loves everyone. With his devotees, he loves them especially because he's reciprocating with the special love that the devotees, with which the devotees approach him. But it doesn't mean that he loves the devotees and he doesn't love everyone else. No? Sometimes I like to give the example of the mother in this connection. Like a mother loves the child when the child is born, even though the baby has 2 days and the baby is not even aware of his mother. It's not even aware of himself. What to speak of the mother, what to speak of reciprocating the mother's love. But the mother is aware of the baby and loves the baby unconditionally from day one. Now, as the baby grows and becomes aware there's something called mama, and he starts to reciprocate because he starts to appreciate the love that he's receiving. The mother's original unconditional love now takes a particular shape to reciprocate with the baby. So, like Bhaktirasa was telling me the other day, an important point in that interaction is when the baby first time says mama or papa, mom, dad, whatever the language, calling the mother, calling the father for the name. That establishes a shift in the relationship. So similarly, in our tradition, we are singing the name of Krishna. So when we invoke the name, it's like a way of acknowledging our relationship, but hopefully acknowledging how much we have been already loved and nourished by that person we are calling, and not just calling him out of fear, out of intimidation or something, but out of proper acknowledgement, basically. So this is the basic premise that I want to speak, because how this all relates to self-love, to self-care, to self-worth. We are practicing bhakti, and bhakti basically implies devotion to Krishna, loving God. And a good beginning point, as we mentioned, a good foundation to love God is know that you are loved by him. It's not that you are trying to love him without being loved. He already loved infinitely. And on that foundation, I try to reciprocate. And in that context, I can love myself also. Why? Because if I want to love God, and this is a very Gaudiya Vaishnava logic, if I want to love Krishna, I must love the things that he loves. Srila Prabhupada will give the example, if you love me, you have to love my dog, right? Because you will love whatever is related to the person you love. So if you want to love Krishna, you have to love also the things that Krishna loves. And the point is that he loves everything. There's nothing he doesn't love. He loves everyone and everything, including ourselves. That may be the most difficult thing to love for us. We may even be easier for us to love Krishna and to love everyone else, except for us. But that's not love then, because the nature of love is all-encompassing. If I'm loving someone, I'm loving everyone else. It's not that Krishna loves you and I hate everyone else. It's not possible. Because loving Krishna entails loving the things that are connected to him, and everything is connected to him. Or loving Krishna means loving the things that he loves, and he loves everything and everyone, including ourselves. So we need to love ourselves, not independently, not in a narcissistic, selfish way. I love myself. I'm so incredible and unique by my own. I'm not saying that, but in a very moving and humbling way. Learn to love ourselves in the context of being loved by Krishna and wanting to love him and loving the things he loves, including ourselves. This is, for example, present, and I don't want to torture you with many Shastra quotations, but a little bit to ground our discussion in Shastra. In the famous definition of bhakti in our tradition that Rupa Goswami gives in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.1.11, Anyabilasita sunyam gyan karmadhyanabritam anukulina Krishna anushilanam bhakti rutama. He uses the word anushilanam in connection to service to Krishna, practical engagement. So Jiva Goswami, in his commentary to this famous verse, says something very interesting in the connection to the topic we are talking about. He says, Anushilanam means service for those persons or things related to God, related to Krishna, or service to Krishna, which is directly offered to him. But he says, because this definition includes also service to the persons related to Krishna, as well as to Krishna himself, this definition avoids the fault of being too narrow. Now, in other words, he's saying, if you conceive bhakti in terms of only loving Krishna, but that love of Krishna is not being reflected in how you love and relate to everything else, that's a very narrow definition of bhakti. That's not our definition of bhakti. The broader, the deeper, the more generous definition of bhakti is you love Krishna and love those persons related to Krishna. And again, everything is related to Krishna. One name of Krishna is Mukhya Sambandha, which means he in relationship to whom everyone and everything has its primary connection and primary relationship, primary Sambandha. So if the very definition of bhakti in our tradition has this broader possibility, loving Krishna entails loving the things, the persons related to him, everything, including us, are related to him. Therefore, we have to learn to love ourselves, to practice proper Uttam Bhakti in a broad way. And again, all this self-love, all this self-care and self-worth is on the foundation of Krishna is finding something lovable in you. And I wouldn't say something, it's a way of speaking. He's finding you lovable. It's not just something in you is lovable and everything else part of your Atma is despicable. He's finding you amazing, wonderful, and lovable. So the goal of our practice is not so much to convince Krishna to love us. No? The goal of our practice is not so much to convince Krishna to like us. He's already doing that. No? So the goal of our life, the ultimate goal is love for God, not love from God. It's just, I'm changing two letters in one word, but be careful with this, with getting it wrong. The goal of life is not love from God. That's already happening. That's a given from day one. Krishna is already loving you unconditionally. So the goal of life is just love for God. Now it's time to return the embrace, return the gaze. So the more we realize Krishna's love for us, the more we will feel inspired for the right reasons to return the embrace, to reciprocate with him. The more we are approaching him, not out of fear, out of pressure, out of who knows what, but out of being so moved and transformed by the fact that he loves us unconditionally from the beginning, without us doing anything to deserve that. Even denying his existence, still he's loving us unconditionally. And by extension, the implication of this is we should love ourselves. Because again, the nature of love is that love loves whatever is loved by our beloved, which is everything. Again, there is this beautiful quote from St. John of the Cross, a Christian mystic, and he will say, you have to love what God sees in you. Krishna sees something in you, learn to love that. Not only love God, learn what love is, love what God is loving in you, what he's seeing in you. Or in other words, love how you are being seen by him. How Krishna is looking at you, what's his glance, what's his gaze, what's the mood, from which place it comes. Try to love that, try to fall in love with Krishna's glance. Darshan, in Sanskrit we have that word darshan, doesn't mean so much to see, but to be seen by God, how to reflect. We are already being seen by Krishna, but how we are being seen, with which eyes he's looking upon us. How I'm willing to step naked in front of him, internally, vulnerable, and allow myself to be seen in all my fragility, in all my fear, in all my messiness, and accept that I'm being accepted absolutely and loved unconditionally. That's a very bold, courageous step, but we need to do it. That's what it means to enter into the chamber of prayer, enter into introspection, knowing that we are being seen through the eye of unconditional love. That's what the Gopi Vastraharana Lila is all about. Krishna is taking the clothes of the gopis. He wants to see the beauty of their nakedness. In one sense, the nakedness applies to, we have to approach Krishna naked, without masks, without trying to fake. Not fake till you make it, as I like to say, but naked till you make it. He's already seeing us in our nakedness and loving us. So, but we are the ones covering up and putting faces and putting masks and trying to fake and trying to fit in. So the more we understand how loved we are, how accepted we already are, the more we understand, I don't need these masks anymore. I can let go of this. I can release all spiritual bypassing. I can relax and can be free. Knowing that you are loved gives you full freedom. And again, Krishna is not loving you for what you are doing, or what you are not doing, or he's not loving you if you perform nicely, if you're perfect in everything you do. That will be conditional love. There are certain conditions for him to love you. No. And I know it's difficult to understand this because it doesn't make sense to the usual way we think about things, people, relationships, and even love. But that's as one Christian say, God is not good at math. So he's not like calculating. He's not a calculating machine. You deserve this, so I love you. You are perfect, so now I love. It's unconditional. So Krishna is not loving you for what you do, for what you think, for what you have, or for what you don't do, think, or have. He just loves you for who you are. Sometimes for us, that doesn't feel enough, but that should be enough, more than enough. He loves you for who you are as an Atma, for who you are ontologically. So our real gift is not so much what we can do, but who we are. And what's the potential of who we are as an Atma in connection to Bhakti. So Krishna is loving that unconditionally. Try to enter into that. Try to, hopefully these are not just mere words, but this takes us to an inner place of experience. So when we get to that place of knowing I'm being loved by Krishna, that's such a profound certitude. As a Christian mystic will say, that's the only certitude we are given, God's unconditional love. Everything else is uncertain. Everything else can happen, cannot happen, as we know. For those of you who have lived life, that means every one of you, you know that no matter how much plans you can make, so many things happen that are out of your plan. So everything else is uncertain, but there's one certainty, Krishna's unconditional love. And with that certainty in place, that will be enough to coexist with everything else being uncertain. That shows how powerful that particular thing is when it's properly established, where we make it foundational, when we ground our existence into that foundation of being the beloved of Krishna. I can deal with everything else being uncertain. And we have so many stories of devotees and saints being thrown into the unknown, being thrown into the most unpredictable, unthinkable circumstances. But they can go through that and they can thrive and they can end up emerging, reborn, die to whatever they needed to die and be reborn to a higher version of themselves, anchored in that certainty. Krishna's unconditional love. So when we have that in place, we can learn to love ourselves as well. You are being loved, you are lovable. And sometimes it is said, you cannot love others until you love yourself. But in our particular perspective here, what we are talking, I will say, you cannot love others until you know that you are already loved. And on that basis, you can love yourself. And on that basis, you can love others, right? There is this sequence. We have to respect the sequence. Sometimes we try to love others, but sometimes we hate ourselves. So what's that love to others if I don't know how to love myself? What we are giving to others? Again, love has to be multidirectional. I cannot just love in one direction and hate in the other. Unconditional love has to be wholesome and healing. So if I'm loving someone, my loving someone has to be in a way that is loving to me as well. If my love to you creates dysfunction and harm and trauma for me, how much love that is what I'm giving to you. So love has to be healing and healthy and wholesome in all the directions. That's the nature of real love. It creates healing in all directions. So that's the sequence. Now, first, know yourself to be loved by He who is love personified. That foundation, accept that. Learn to love yourself from that humbling place and extend that love to everyone else. Remind each other of how loved they are. That's such necessary news, good news, blessed news. And by contrast to that, if you don't know yourself to be loved, if you have concluded even that you are not lovable, that nobody will love you ever, how you will dare to love someone? Who can dare to love if they don't think that they are lovable? You follow my point? The goal of life for us is to love Krishna, and by extension to love everyone, because loving Krishna means loving everything in connection to him, as we say, and that's everything. So our goal of life is to love everything. Let's frame it that way. What's our prayojan, the ultimate goal? To love everything. But how will I love everything, which already is overwhelming, so to speak of loving one person, to love everything? How will I do that if I don't think that I'm lovable? If I don't think that I'm receiving love? How can I extend that to others if I think that I'm absolutely despicable and unworthy of that? So you can see how important it is to have this foundation in place so we can actually pursue the actual goal of life, which is to love in every possible direction. So being loved leads to feeling lovable, and feeling lovable is what allows us, or gives us permission, if you will, to reciprocate. Because if we think we are crap, let's put it that way, why you will want to give yourself to others? No, that will be cruelty. No, you're spreading crap all over the planet. You're giving yourself to Krishna thinking you are crap, so that means you are throwing crap onto Krishna. That's not very generous. So it's important that we have, again, the right idea about who we are, the right idea about who Krishna is. So all these relationships can be really redeeming and redemptive and healthy. And from that place, when we have all these ideas in place, we can even pray in a very healthy, beautiful, liberal direction in terms of having love for everyone and everything in every possible direction. There's like Narahari Sarkar did in his Krishna Bhajanamrita. You can look for that, beautiful verses 35 and 36. No? So in those verses, Narahari Sarkar, he's saying, may I have affection? He makes a long list of things that he would like to have affection for. Because again, the more you get closer to divine love, the more you realize your potential for loving everything. So he starts to say, may I have affection for the devotees? May I have affection for my seva? May I have affection for the name of Krishna? May I have affection for... I won't go into all the things he mentioned. But he concludes, the very last item in the list, he says, may I have affection for my Atma? No? And he then says, so that I will develop devotion to Krishna. So he's pointing this, self-love, self-worth is crucial in our relationship to Krishna. If I don't, and of course, again, to have affection for my Atma may be necessary to know first, Krishna already has affection for your Atma, for who you are. He already loves you. So may I love myself in that context, not in any context, in that context. And on that foundation, I will develop devotion to Krishna. In other words, proper self-love and proper self-worth in the context of bhakti fosters bhakti, ignites bhakti, inspires further bhakti. It's not something that gets in the way. But by contrast, if I do not learn how to relate to myself, if I don't learn, as Mahatma Prabhu will say, how to be my best friend, if I don't treat myself as I will treat my best friend, probably I'm engaging in Krishna consciousness, and the result is that I feel worse and worse about myself. And who wants to join such a movement? No. Join this practice, and the result will be you will feel miserable and terrible about who you are. No, thank you. So again, I'm trying to share some ideas for us to see how our tradition, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Bhakti, Krishna consciousness, however you may like to call it, I like to call it radical personalism, as you know, our tradition fosters and promotes a healthy, wholesome sense of self-worth, self-care, self-love, deeply rooted in Krishna's unconditional love. So only when I will make this case just to conclude, and we will open if there are any questions or comments, but only when we accept that we are the beloved of Krishna, then we can love him back for the right reasons. If we don't have clear that Krishna already loves me, probably my attempts to love him, serve him, please him are coming from an unhealthy place. So it's important that we examine that. It's important that we are introspective and pay attention. What's the motivation behind my action? What's the intention? What's the conception? Again, which are the ideas that I'm entertaining about who am I, who Krishna is. So when we can love Krishna back for the right reasons, knowing ourselves to be loved by him, then we can love ourselves and we can love everyone, everything else also for the right reasons. We want love for the right reasons. That could be a good title also. Love for the right reasons. Love as it is. As we have Bhagavad Gita as it is, we want everything else that it is as it is. So anyhow, some thoughts that I want to share today with you in the context of this annual conference of progressive Vaishnavism. And hopefully my point was clear, and how important that is in the context of being progressive, how to remain progressing, how to remain open, to allow Krishna to be not only what we think he is, but all that he can be and all that he wants to be in my life today, and to allow myself to be all that I can be for Krishna today. And all this potential can be facilitated deeply if we have this idea in mind. We are already loved unconditionally, infinitely accepted by the sweet absolute. And on that foundation, I can learn to love myself from a very humbling place and extend that unconditional acceptance and love to everyone else. Thank you so much for your time. And if there are any questions, if there are any comments or anything you may like to share, I'm open to that. We have a few more minutes. Bhakti Rasa is checking in the streaming, in the thread of the streaming, there are any comments or shares. So that's a comment, Bhakti Rasa? Bhakti Rasa? Can you hear me?
Yes, that's a question, Maharaj.
That's a question. Okay, it says, I can see how my personal dysfunction has affected my perception of myself as unworthy and unlovable, but do you see some collective influence? Well, of course, we are interrelated again, no? So the environment plays a role in us. We have our free will, we have our individuality and our choices, but also we are a byproduct of the environment, as Srila Siddha Maharaj will put it. So yeah, that can also create certain input. Many of our ideas about ourselves are informed or misinformed by what we hear or learn, quote unquote, from other sources. Especially, yes, if you join a particular tradition and you don't know basically anything about that tradition, and unfortunately in some cases the education one receives is not that accurate in certain aspects, at least. Like, for example, this, I've heard many devotees telling me, I was never told that I was loved by Krishna. Actually, I was felt the exact opposite, and many times in the name of surrender or humility, I was felt like miserable and felt like a bad person, and all that created an over-identification with unworthiness and negativity. Or sometimes we already are carrying that baggage from before, coming from our whatever home stuff, childhood trauma, felt in the same way, and then we come to Krishna consciousness, and sometimes that's reinforced and amplified. Or sometimes some people come to Krishna Bhakti without any of those trauma, and they get that stuff when they join. or they don't get that. I'm not saying it's everyone is getting that, but sometimes that happens in the name of being educated and instructed, or being like strict with ourselves. Doesn't mean you have to be terribly bad about yourself, right? Like I always like to say, for example, but someone may argue, but Maharaj, you have to be humble. We have to be humble. But humble doesn't mean that I develop a sense of unworthiness and I'm despicable and I'm the worst of the worst. Of course, some acharyas have expressed themselves extremely in similar terms, but they are experiencing something unique that we are not there and we shouldn't imitate. And we should follow the example that Mahaprabhu gives when he says, Trinada Pisanishena. And I won't go too much into that direction because it's too long, but he says, try to be more humble than a blade of grass. That single line, I know that has been many times misunderstood and abused, consciously or unconsciously, but Mahaprabhu is giving the example of the blade of grass. So he says, be more humble than a blade of grass. And what's in a blade of grass? A blade of grass is something that bends without breaking. So that's an important point, right? Humility is about, okay, inclining ourselves, being humble, bending, but in a way that is not breaking us. It should be done gracefully. It should be done with integrity. It should be done with dignity. It should preserve our sense of self, basically. If I break, every time I'm being humble, I'm breaking myself. I'm doing violence to myself. Again, that's violence extended to others because we are interrelated. And that's not something that Krishna finds pleasure in. So our humility and all these qualities should be expressed in a way that is healthy. So we have to pursue some environment that reinforces wholesome ideas about who we are, who Krishna is, how to relate. That's sadhu sangha, basically. That's created some safe space, even conceptually. The safety, there has to be a conceptual safety. Now, when you receive concepts, you receive ideas that are safe, that create safety, that creates support, that creates lovingness, none that makes us insecure, traumatized, neurotic, or narcissistic, self-centered in any of these toxic directions, but a healthy, wholesome, grounded, rooted, human sense of who I am really and all that I can be in connection to Krishna, which is an exciting prospect, right? So yeah, we should be creative and crafty in how we not only find proper environment, but how we relate to ourselves on a daily basis. Because also you can have the greatest sadhusanga on earth, but you have to learn to coexist with yourself on a daily basis 24/7. So that's an important aspect that sometimes we also forget. How do I treat myself? How do I relate to myself? Pay attention to that and try to do it in a generous way. I'm trying to in a way that represents how Krishna is looking upon us. We don't want to see us in a way that goes against Krishna's own darshan, Krishna's own way of glancing at us. We want to align ourselves with his glance, with his loving sight upon us. So I'm not saying that's easy. I never say the word easy in the whole lecture. Even though it may sound easy for some, it may sound like even like self-indulging, but I don't think so. If you try to do it, you will see how hard it is. It's actually more difficult than treating yourself as crap. That has become the not natural and the norm for many of us. So to look at the mirror and say, I love myself, I will accept myself unconditionally. In the context of what we mentioned, of course, today, try to do it and see what comes. See which voices come. Sometimes come these voices of, that's Maya, that's self-indulging, that's narcissism, that shouldn't be. So we have to do something with those voices. No, what gets triggered? We need to confront the trigger and integrate that with proper guidance, proper knowledge, and healthy company, and healthy self-treatment, self-care, right? Because again, taking care about for us is not an independent project because we don't exist as isolated beings. Our existence is interconnected and interrelated. So treating ourselves well means extending that to others. Treating others well is extending that to me. And Krishna is also part of that equation. So anyhow, some thoughts. I hope that helps. Is there any other question or comment? No, not so far. Okay. We are already 1 hour, so I think it's a good time frame. And I assume here in India it's quite late. Not that late, but a little late. So But for all of you there, I think today is the first lecture of the day there, so you will have another few more lectures next. So maybe we can put the discussion to rest. No, you say something else about Teresa. Some things there, okay?
Yes, it's coming.
Okay. The question says, what is the hard part of learning to love ourselves, Maharaj? I mean, I don't know. I'm just sharing ideas in general. Each one has their own journey. For some people, it will be harder. For some people, it will be easier. It will be more natural. It all depends. Again, I'm not saying with this, everyone has the same problem. Or most of us may have the same problem, but in different degrees. So I cannot give you just one answer, one size fits all answer. So but in general, is again, the hard part of learning to love ourselves is that the idea is also, again, do not try to love yourself independently. First, you need to try to know yourself to be loved. And in big part, that's our problem, that we are unaware of that. We are unaware of Krishna. That's the root problem described in Shastra is avidya, no, or ignorance of the fact, we could say ignorance of the fact, ignorant of Krishna, ignorant of who you are in connection to Krishna. And by extension, that means ignorance of the fact that Krishna loves you, because that means who Krishna is and who you are in connection to him. So the original root cause of all problems in existence is described in Shastra, avidya, this ignorance of who God is and who we are. Includes the idea of ignoring the fact that you are already loved. So without having that in place, and again, this is not just a concept, we need to internalize this to the point that it becomes an experience. I lived as the beloved of Krishna. It's not only to say, Krishna loves me, but you have to live the life of the beloved. As Henry Nouwen will say, live the lives of the beloved. It begins by knowing that you are loved, but then you have to step into those shoes and live the lives of the beloved. So that's the hard part. I mean, we cannot love ourselves as long as we don't know ourselves to be already loved. And we may know ourselves to be already loved on some percentage, and on that percentage we can actually extend that love to us from a healthy place, realistic place. But according to how much we ignore that fact, in the same way we may not be able to provide that to ourselves because we are not aware of that reality. We need to know ourselves to be loved in order to love ourselves in a healthy way. Because if not, we can create so many new agey ways of self-love that end up being self-centered, narcissistic, superficial, not humbling. And we are not promoting that here. Not that extreme, nor the extreme of I'm completely unworthy, despicable crap. So those two are two sides of the same coin. So the challenge is always, not only in this reality, how to tread the middle path, how to get the middle point. So the middle point is, I love myself because Krishna loves me, and I'm loving what he loves, and I happen to be that, and there's something, I'm incredible as a soul. I'm not my own creation. Again, there's place to say those things in a way that is humbling. So I will pound that post. No? The hard thing to love ourselves is that we don't feel ourselves loved. And again, I'm not also only limiting this to Krishna, but if you were born in a family with when you receive lots of love and affection from your parents in a healthy way, probably that will make it easier for you to love yourself, because you are having this validation and confirmation that comes on a daily basis from your environment that you are lovable, we love you. So you receive that message, you internalize it, and you develop a strong sense of self-worth, self-esteem, however you may like to call it. But if from day one in this lifetime, let's say, you don't have that feedback, of course, that also will get in the way. So that's why I'm saying each case is unique. But most of us also do not come from a 108% functional family. So sometimes some of those things also begin at home, plus unawareness of the fact that Krishna loves you unconditionally. So each one of us may need to do their own work in terms of, again, healing what we have not received at home, finding that in another way, and of course, going to the root and becoming aware. The most important person, Krishna, is already providing me the most important thing, love. So I already been loved by the most significant person. There's one more question, which is recently that came, or I think we talked about that in our radical personalism retreat in the UK. The question says, can you explain the saying, lower than a worm in a stool? Yes, why not? Thank you. Thank you for the question, because again, that's another one that has been somehow, again, without bad intention, but unconsciously maybe weaponized to create a toxic sense of humility, a toxic version of that, and basically forcing people to feel bad about themselves. So yeah, one line is Trinada Pisunicena, we address that. And then another, which sometimes may be more intense, is this line, which is a verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Jagai Madai Haiti Muniste Papishta Purisheda Kita Haiti Munise Lagishna. First of all, this is a verse, this is what we mentioned, I remember when we talk about it. This is a verse spoken by Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami about himself, right? So he's not telling you should do that, you should feel, he's saying that. So there's a place to say that's his own feeling. And of course, he's Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami. So who knows what he's feeling? Who knows where he is? What's extreme humility he's feeling in that divine love? That there's a place to say all those things and to say, are you there? Are you Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami? Can you just repeat those words from the same inner place? Or that will be dysfunctional in your case. Well, in his case, it's an ecstatic symptom of humility coming from who knows where. So I will say, first of all, yes, we shouldn't do copy-paste of Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami. One thing is to follow his footsteps, another thing is to imitate. Anukar, Anusar, Anukar. So on one side, you can say that. On another side, and this is the main point, how to explain that because he says, I'm more sinful than Jagai Madai, and I'm lower than the worm in the stool, right? That's the line. And again, I know that the imaginary seems even like evokes Vivatsarasa, evokes disgust, like a worm in the stool, I mean lower than that. And it's delicate. It's delicate. Again, if we don't know how to understand these verses, those verses can create dysfunction, a misreading of the verses. So how to explain this line in a healthy way, trying to capture, okay, what's the imaginary, the collective imaginary of the time also, not that someone like Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami will evoke that particular symbolic depiction of a worm and the stool and this and that, and how that fits into all that we have talked today, right? Because we want to be humble, but that has to happen naturally. So one way to say that, and I told the whole story about it, I won't go to that story because that may take too much time. But in brief, a worm in the stool is out of what a worm can do with stool. No, it can create compost. No, so a worm is doing something interesting in stool. So, in other words, somehow the worm is purifying what is considered impure, right? So, from his perspective of humility, or from our situation, I would say we can say, okay, no, the worm is capable of dealing with this whatever impure circumstance and purify that and create something nourishing, compost out of excrement. I'm not able to do that yet. I'm failing in that. Therefore, I'm worse than a worm in the stool. I'm lower than that. There's a place to say that from that place, from a place that applies to your situation. You can take that particular symbol or imaginary and make it applicable and relatable to your station. Again, we cannot imitate and compare ourselves with Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami. And from a healthy place, we can appreciate someone else's contribution or capacity and realize, oh, beautiful, but I'm not able to do that. But also that, even that has to be done in a healthy way. Because also you can go on a comparison trip and just compare, oh, I cannot do that, I cannot do that, and I cannot do that. But so it should be done in a graceful way. Like if I appreciate someone's virtues, capacities, and then I look back at me and I realize I don't have that, but I hope I'm getting inspired by their example for me to cultivate that. That's a healthy way. That's a way for me to deal with this particular line, lower than the worm in the stool. Because if not, you can just get depressed. Oh, they're having all this, I don't have it. You can get envious. I would like them not to have it, so I feel better about myself, or whatever. No? Perfectionism, competitiveness, performance. That's not the spirit of the verse. So, but it's healthy to appreciate qualities and virtues around us, and maybe to reflect back, to allow those things to reflect back on us and see, okay, where I am in relationship to that, and what's that virtue capacity inspiring me to become better, to grow. No? So you can integrate all this in a healthy way that ends up in an invitation to grow, in an invitation to expand. So that's how I personally will take it. I'm not saying that literally Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami was feeling what I'm saying, but again, we cannot force ourselves to imitate him. That's not healthy. So we should allow these lines or these expressions. Again, this has been expressed by someone in Prem Bhakti, and need to see that. So where I am in connection to that. So, okay, what to do with that line? How can I make that line applicable to me, relatable and relevant to me? And we have to do that similar exercise with so many things, which it doesn't mean that we are distorting scripture, adapting things to us. Scripture speaks on so many levels. Even when someone says something from the higher realm, it includes all the other layers, and we have to be capable of making all those things relatable to us, because we cannot just force ourselves to jump and be there. So how all these things are speaking to us in our particular stage of the journey, that's an important aspect of hermeneutics, how to understand scripture, how to address revelation in a way that speaks to me. Because if not, if I don't find Krishna consciousness relevant and relatable, eventually I will leave it altogether, or I'll just continue practicing for the wrong reasons, as I mentioned in the introduction to my book, Radical Personalism. We want to continue practicing Krishna consciousness for the right reasons, not to stay externally for the wrong reasons. So for that, we need to have proper, again, approach, understanding, to keep it relatable. So some thoughts. Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's an important one. Okay, something else, Teresa? No. Okay.
No, that's it, Maharaj.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you again. Thank you to all the ones organizing this conference. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to all the hearers and the participants, those who are live, those who will connect later. Again, my pleasure, my honor to somehow or other be present here today. I'm trying to contribute something to this bigger equation in this beautiful Gaudiya Vaishnava family we are all in. So thank you so much for giving me the chance and the possibility of being part of it.
And thank you very much, Maharaj, for bringing the good news and for putting into context self-care in the context of bhakti. It's such a vital thing. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we will have 2 more sessions later today at 11 o'clock. It will be Danya, and then 3 o'clock is Pracharananda. So I hope I'll be able to join us then. Thank you very much.